Welcome! In this series of short videos, we will look at topics common to both the PowerBasic console and Windows compilers. Today we will look at the use of macros in your applications. So what kind of macros are there? We have single line, where your code is all in a line. Multi-line, where the macro contains several lines of code. Macro functions, where the macro returns a value. In this video, we're going to cover both the single line and multi-line macros, and save the macro function till the next video. In some of our recent videos, we have used macros, but this will be the first video in which we go into macros in detail and explain what exactly they are and what you can do with them. Inside PowerBasic, a macro is a powerful text substitution construct that, as I have said, can be used in three ways. We can have a single line macro, a multi-line macro, or a macro function. This video is going to cover the single line and the multi-line macros. A macro generates no executable code unless it is actually referenced. Therefore, you can set your macros up in an include file quite safely. So let's create some macros and show how they are used. If we demonstrate first of all this single line macro, what we've done here is we've created a macro called mpy. As my own personal naming convention, I tend to precede the name of the macro with the letter M. This is to indicate later on in the code, and especially where someone else is looking at my code, that this is indeed a macro. So what we've done here is we've used the macro keyword followed by the name of our macro, mpy. And we're making it equal to the value of pi to quite a number of decimal places. What we're doing here is setting up our pi as a constant. As you will see here, the pi value has at the end of the numbers two hash signs. This is indicating to PowerBasic that the number we are providing is to be used as an extended format. This will allow 18 significant digits, which should be more than enough for your use of pi. Now that we've defined our single line macro, giving a value to the mpy, how can we use this in the code? What we have on screen now is a message to send the value of pi to our log. So you will see in here we have referenced mpy. When you go to compile your application, the text mpy is replaced with the actual value of pi. For example, this piece of text. This keeps your code quite clean and succinct. We're using the str$ command to turn this numerical value into a string. We have used the optional parameter, (18), to say we want this to 18 significant digits. If we try running the code now, we will see it prints out 18 significant digits for the value of pi. Using a macro in this way allows you to effectively extend the language. This can be easily demonstrated by another use of a single line macro. What we've put on screen is macro mRelease package equals macro. It may take you a moment to get your head around just what exactly we've done here. When you attempt to compile your code, any evidence of the mRelease package will be replaced by the word macro. So how can we actually use this? Say for example we wanted to store two pieces of information on this particular piece of software. We wanted to store the build version and the version number. So we're using the mRelease package followed by the word build version equals alpha build. Now as you'll note, we haven't done any declaration of build version or for that matter ver number. But when the application compiles, the mRelease package will be replaced as a piece of text with the word macro. So this is effectively extending your language to have anything you wish to put into a macro. So how would we reference that in the code? If we wanted to send this to our log, we can put a piece of text out saying release build version equals, and then just use the word build version, as this is going to be already set up with the value alpha build. and the var number is going to come out with our version number. If we run that code now, we'll see those details appearing on our log. So it doesn't take long to realize you can use this construct to extend the language type you can use within PowerBasic. So having looked at this single line macro, what can we do with multi-line macros? Say for example, in our code we wanted to set up a local variable, in this case a string variable called strdata. And we want to set a default value to that string variable to be a comma delimited list of 5 numbers. This could well be something that you'll do in your applications on a regular basis, and you may prepare several variables with the same default values to be changed later on in the code. So is there an easier way of using a macro to set these default values up for you? We'll now use a macro, which is a multi-line macro, to set up this construct for you. And this is the construct we're going to be doing. We're going to call our macro mprepFormat. And looking at the code here, it appears to be taking a parameter, str variable. But unlike functions and subroutines, you'll see the type of this is not declared. It's not showing as str variable as string. The reason for this is a straight substitution. Whatever we pass in as a parameter is going to be used inside the macro. So the 2 lines of code we have within this macro are first of all to declare str variable as a string. In this case, the variable is not actually called str variable, this is a substitution. Whatever we pass in on the parameter list is going to be substituted for the declaration of the variable. And then we're going to make whatever that variable is equal to our comma delimited list of 5 values. So let's try that out in the code. So we will first comment out where we put the lines in normally. And we will now put in our single line macro, mprepFormat, containing the name of the variable we wish to first of all declare and secondly populate. And we will send the value of that variable out to our log. If we try running the code now, we will see we get strdata equals and the 5 comma delimited numbers appearing on the log. So what this single line of code has done is it has declared the variable you have specified and it has populated it with a default value. All done in a single line of code in your application. This becomes particularly useful if you're doing a number of different variables, all to be prepared in the same way. For example, we're now going to prepare 3 additional variables, data2, data3 and data4. We're going to set data4 with a different format, so we'll set up a different macro to perform that one. For this new macro, we're passing 2 parameters rather than 1. The first parameter is the variable we wish to do something with, and the second parameter is the data we're going to be putting into that variable. As you can see in the code, we're using local and whatever the variable is to declare it. We're then populating that variable with the data that's come in on our parameters. So if we add these additional variables to our output log and then run the application, we'll see the values come out quite happily. So if you have a large number of variables to declare and populate with a default value, this gives you a very easy and fast way of doing it in your code. When PowerBasic compiles, it will expand the macros out into the code. So let's say we want to do something more complex. We want to do something with a user-defined type. So let's declare a user-defined type at the beginning of our code. So here we have a simple UDT called storage. It's going to contain 3 elements, a date string, a value string, and another value string. Ideally, before you reference data within a user-defined type in your code, you may want to prepare it with a default value, for example empty length strings, or in this case, a date in the date field. So we're going to prepare a new macro, and we'll call this one prepUDT. We will give it 2 parameters. The first parameter is the user-defined type we wish to actually declare and populate, and the second variable is the data we want to put into one of the string fields. And we will then print out both the date and the value from that user-defined type. So here is the skeleton of our macro, with the two parameters. The first being a user-defined type, and the second being a string. As before, these are straight substitutions. Whatever comes in on the parameters is going to be substituted for what we're about to do. So first of all, we will declare our user-defined type as a useStorage. And then we can begin to populate the values within that type. So we're putting in the current date from date $, into the str_date element. We're putting the input value passed on the parameters list into the value field, and we're setting the other value field to be an empty length string. There are some limitations with macros which is worth mentioning here. When you're preparing one of these user-defined types, I quite often use the prefix command to save a wee bit of typing. However, you can't use the prefix command within a macro, because you're effectively doing something that's not on a single line. It will generate an error. If you also use the underline as a line folding command, this will also generate an error. However, these are fairly small limitations to what you can do with macros. So now that we've actually prepared our macro, let's try running it. And there is a user-defined type. The two elements are coming out to a log quite happily, the first being the date $ value, and the second being the value we passed on the parameters. So if you're preparing a number of user-defined types based on this premise, you can use this command again on a differently named type. We're now creating one called uTomorrow, and we're putting new data and the date into this. If we run that code now, we'll see this runs quite happily. So what we've seen today is we have touched on the use of macros within your application. We started with a single line macro to store constants. We can also use the macro to create our own custom command words to store constant values within the code for build versions. We can also use our macros to prepare variables, both declaring and populating them. And finally, we touched on the ability of creating user-defined types and prepping them within our macro. In our next video, we'll cover the macro functions and also the use of temp variables within macros. However, that's it for today. Thank you for watching.